Hello and welcome back. Here we are for Chapter 11, Section 3. We're going to talk about managing and sustaining marine fisheries. What are the requirements for sustaining marine fisheries? We're going to look at this as a fourfold approach, if you will. This is just kind of hitting what we're going to go into in detail. We need improved monitoring of both the fish and shellfish populations. We need cooperative fisheries management among the various communities of fishermen and nations. We've got to reduce the number of fishing subsidies. Government subsidies go out to keep people in the business, if you will. And a lot of it's going to come down to you and me making careful consumer choices when it comes to buying seafood. Let's dive right in and take a look at some of these. Now, when it comes to estimating and monitoring fishing populations, we have several strategies that we use as like a government process, if you will, to try and do this. The traditional approach has simply been maximum sustained yield. That's the goal. Say, hey, we need a sustained yield. Then we want to go get the maximum number of fish that we can, but have a sustained yield out there. This is the idea is there to project the maximum harvest. So we say, all right, you can go out there and catch so many pounds of fish this year. And if we do that, don't take any more than that, it won't cause the population to drop. Of course, there's a lot of problems with this. It's very difficult to know exactly what the population is out there. And monitoring, is everybody actually taking enough? Because if everybody's getting the same size catch, it's really easy to go beyond what we should. Also, this isn't taking into account any other factors, like what happened with the climate this year. What about other species that have been coming in and eating and interacting? So, another approach is trying to look at the optimum sustained yield. The first was maximum sustained yield, or MSY. This is OSY, the optimum sustained yield. This yield is trying to attempt to account for interactions among various species. If we know we've had shark populations increase and they eat these types of fish, well, we know we need to lower the number of fish, because it's not really that maximum sustained yield isn't looking at that. It's looking, what were the numbers of fish last year, how should they have reproduced, and what should we have this year? The optimum sustained yield is trying to look at a bigger picture. And we also have multi-species management techniques. This is doing more to take in this competitor and predator-prey interactions. So it's looking at these interactions amongst other species, taking in the predator-prey relationships, and trying to make calculations on what the harvest, what the yields really should be. Obviously, there can be a lot of difficulties in doing this because the marine system is so large. We have multiple countries going out there and fishing and tapping into this same resource. So trying to use such a large computer model, taking into all these factors, and then getting everybody else on board to agree to it can be incredibly difficult. So a lot of scientists just want to fall back on the precautionary principle. This is better safe than sorry, right? Let's show some precaution. And we just simply say, you know what? We need to sharply reduce the number of fish harvests. Whatever your things are saying, we need to cut that down by a bit. Because what we know for sure right now, we're overfishing. We're taking more than the sea can actually bear. So the precautionary principle would say better safe than sorry. Let's take it down a notch. Also, we want to make sure we completely close overfished areas. If it's overfished, we keep taking smaller and smaller and fewer fish. If we don't stop, we will crash the system. So overfished areas have got to be roped off, if you will, until they can recover. But how do we manage and sustain? Well, community management of these fisheries is one such approach in trying to regulate. Our fish harvest, we did the little game of the tragedy of the commons. A lot of you came up with hey, nobody can take more than this, or we have to leave this many in the lake. You came up with different ways to regulate yourselves, and this is one of them. Community management is one that we say that every person that's a fisherman, everybody that goes out and fish, gets a fair share of the total catch. So it may be that your ship really got lucky and pulled in a whole bunch, but this guy was fishing over here and didn't get as much. But it's a share for the total community, because everybody went out. You just happened to be in the right spot this time, and he wasn't. Next time it may be flip-flop. So what we do is everybody gets a fair share. This cuts down on just massive overfeeding. If you know, whatever we bring in, we all share. It's helped that tremendously. So community management. Another one sometimes is co-management with the government. And this winds up being very common. A lot of times it's not just the community involved, but the federal government in as well. The government will set quotas. So the national government will say, hey, okay, we need to no more than this for this species, and then the quota gets divided up amongst the community, where the community then may divide it up again. It's going to limit the fishing seasons. It'll say, you know what, we'll be able to go fish between here and here. Maybe we want to protect the breeding season or long enough time for fish to hatch and get out. But they'll set fishing seasons and regulate fishing gear. We've gotten so good with our technology, they'll suddenly say, you know what, nets can be no larger than blah. Lines can be no longer than blah. No one is allowed to use what, in other words, you can't go throw dynamite in the river to go fishing, right? You throw one stick and everything blows up and you haul them in. We're going to regulate the gear to a degree, but this is an aspect of a lot of times of this co-management, both the government and communities getting involved. Now, when we talk about the government, we always come into this full cost pricing. There's got to be something that we think about all the time when it comes to the environment. Governments currently are spending over $35 billion a year subsidizing fishing. In other words, we need our fishermen out there and they say, you know what, we'll cover the cost of your boat, or if you don't catch fish, we'll pay you anyway. We've got to be careful. We've got people going into business and they're buying boats and they're buying equipment, etc., because the government says no matter what, we'll cover the cost. You've got people going into business and they're not actually catching enough fish to make sales, but they're still making a good living off of the government subsidies. This is something we really need to carefully look at. It often leads to the overfishing because, hey, I can go get this equipment, I can get all these things because the government will cover me to get it, and then we got to go out and catch those fish so we can pay it off, and it oftentimes does lead to overfishing, and it discourages long-term sustainability. Once again, we can deplete a population and we can watch it crash. We overfish 1 year and it might be 6, 7 years before the population can recover if we manage it well after that point in time. Then you and me, you and I, we need to try and choose sustainably produced seafood. When you go to the store and you go to buy food, there's a difference a lot of times in what's there. And the more we buy the sustainably produced and we don't buy the other, there's less a demand and they don't go after it. It's economics. We need to label sustainably caught and raised fish. A lot of people will, oh, this is the sustainably caught. I tell you what, when we're at Sam's and Walmart, well, Sam's mainly, this is where we go when we buy our bulk stuff. We're looking, and I wanted to get a particular, my wife was like, I don't know, what kind is that? Was it swai? Was it, we normally bought tilapia. Well, what is swai? And I mean, we're in the phone, and we've got the phone out, and we're Googling, and oh, okay, yeah, this is a farm-raised fish, and it eats plant matter. Why does it matter? Well, if it's eating plant matter, well, it's much more sustainable. If it's fish that eats other fish, well, even if it's being farm raised, it has to be fed that protein, and a lot of times it's just not as sustainable. So you and I out there looking and choosing this fish over that fish makes a difference. Once again, what we're buying is what they will tend to produce. Now, in 1999, the Marine Stewardship Council, this is a London-based organization, began identifying and certifying sustainably produced seafood. So a lot of times look for that. Look for those labels that it has been, this is sustainably produced. And we need to have more of that. Labels clearly that this is from farm caught, this is farm food, this is a sustainable approach. And as much as possible, choose plant-eating species of fish over the meat-eating variety of fish. Tilapia, catfish, carps, like there are a lot of different ones out there, but this is a lot more economically sustainable because of what they're eating. Salmon do have to eat other fish. They have to have a higher protein content. And a lot of times what we're doing is we're feeding them fish meal from wild caught fish. So we're going out, we're getting wild caught fish. Maybe it's not fish that you and I eat at the supermarket, but then we're turning that into chum, feeding it the salmon. Now, we do eat salmon at my house from time, usually about once every week, maybe once every other week. We definitely eat it. We do try and get the farm fresh, but it's not as sustainable as the tilapia and some other fish. Maybe we should switch a little more, cut down maybe only once a month. Different things have their benefits. Putting the chart up here, these are some things that can be done. And we kind of need to think, which ones do we want to focus on? Usually we always want, let's do that, that's the one. It's usually going to be a little bit of all of it, but we've got to decide where do we put our interest in. Fishery regulations, do we want to try and do more to regulate the fishing industry? Economic approaches, do we want to do more? Make sure it's full cost pricing. Reduce or eliminate the subsidies, so we're paying whatever it really does cost to go get the fish. Protections, whether we're putting no fishing zones up, marine reserves, something where we're not going to go after it. Consumer information, so you and I know what we're buying. Was this wild caught? Is this was this from a subsidized area? Is it farm fresh? Is it a sustainable approach? Once again, just consumer information so we know what we get. Bycatch. Remember there used to be things a lot of times, don't buy certain types of tuna because they're killing a lot of dolphins in their nets. Yeah, are we getting stuff where they are using nets that allow the smaller fish to get out? If we're going for a certain tuna, well, you know, you can have the holes big enough for the smaller fish to get out and escape. We only want certain size ones. Are we using technology that's doing that? Aquaculture. Am I buying this from a sustainable harvested area? If it's being raised in a farm, it's almost always a sustainable because it's only here because we're growing it and raising it. And I know exactly what I have. I know exactly what I can take out of my lake because I'm the one managing the entire thing. And non-invasive invasion. We want to make sure that we're doing things to keep invasive species at bay, if you will. Can we put something into the tanks of ballast to make sure anything in the ballast would be killed before it's dumped out? Because the big ship takes water in over here, comes across the ocean and dumps it here, and all of a sudden we've got invasive species. We need to make sure we're doing something to keep this stuff at bay. These are just some of the things that we've got to look at, we've got to address. Some of it is you and I, and some of it is even you and I deciding what policies that we need to enact. That takes care of it for section 3. Come back and join me next time and we'll look at protecting and sustaining our wetlands.